Coming up on our newscast tonight. In his first meeting with top aides since returning from Singapore, President Moon Jae-in highlights what the diplomacy tour helped accomplish. He also expressed regret over not being able to hike the minimum wage to the promised level. The finance chief and the nation's central banker sit down for talks. The possible side effects of the pay increase is one of the key discussion topics. The nation's capital is under heat wave warning, the first one of the year. With the mercury not going down significantly even at night, it would be wise to refrain from spending too much time outdoors. News Center begins now. It's 8 p.m. here in Korea, live from our studio in Seoul. This is Arirang News Center. Welcome to our program. I'm Daniel Che. President Moon Jae-in apologized for not being able to keep his election pledge of raising the nation's minimum wage to around $9 by the year 2020. This comes after the government's announcement of a less than expected 10.9% pay hike for next year. Arirang Chief Cheongwani correspondent Moon Gun-young has our top story.
2020년까지 최저임금 1만 원을 이룬다는 목표는 사실상 어려워졌습니다. 결과적으로 대선 공약을 지키지 못하게 된 것을 사과드립니다.
South Korean President Moon Jae-in opened his first meeting with top aides since getting back from his overseas tour with an apology for failing to deliver one of his key pledges in the 2017 presidential election. The president's remarks come on the heels of an announcement made by a council of representatives from the government, labor, and management over the weekend that it had reached a decision to raise the next year's minimum wage to 8,350 won, roughly $7.40 an hour. That's a 10.9% increase from the current 667. It may not be by year 2020, but the government will do its utmost to raise the nation's minimum wage threshold to 10,000 won, or $8.86 at the earliest date possible, the president said, noting the Minimum Wage Commission's double-digit wage raise decision in 2019, following a whopping 16.4% increase this year, the biggest rise in 2 decades.
최저임금의 빠른 인상은 저임금 노동자들의 임금을 높여 인간다운 삶을 보장하는 동시에 가계소득을 높여 내수를 살리고 경제를 성장시켜 일자리의 증가로 이어지는 선순환 효과를 목표로 합니다.
As what is key is for the economy to cope with the minimum wage hikes made this year and next, the president urged cooperation from all sides, the labor, the businesses, and the government, especially to ensure those small and medium-sized businesses remain insulated from any negative impact. Moon Gun-young, Arirang News, the Blue House.
Meanwhile, Seoul's finance minister and the BOK chief discussed ways to tackle a number of economic issues. Talks focused on growing U.S.-China trade tensions and the country's sluggish job figures. Won Jung-hwan has the highlights from that meeting.
Finance Minister Kim Dong-yeon and Bank of Korea Governor Lee Ju-yeol agreed on Monday to take preemptive measures against a number of risks facing the country's economy. At their 7th round of policy talks since Kim Dong-yeon took office in June last year, Kim expressed his concerns that the latest minimum wage increase could be a burden on the Korean economy in the second half of this year. South Korea's minimum wage for next year has been set at nearly $7.50 per hour, up 10.9% from this year. The two also shared concerns on the growing external and internal risk to the Korean economy, including the escalating trade tensions between Washington and Beijing, and the country's sluggish job growth figures. Given that China and the U.S. are Korea's top 2 trading partners, accounting for 37% of Korea's exports, the BOK chief and finance minister agreed to evaluate the impact of the trade spat on the Korean economy and cooperate through a mix of preemptive monetary and fiscal policies to ensure stable growth. They also highlighted the need for policies to tackle sluggish job creation. Between January and June, a monthly average of 142,000 new jobs were added, the slowest growth since the 2008 global financial crisis. The talks come a few days after the BOK held its key rate steady for July and lowered its growth forecast for this year by 0.1% to 2.9%. and 2 days before the finance ministry is set to release its economic policy measures for the second half of 2018. 원정환, Arirang News.
Turning our attention to President Moon's 6-day trip to India and Singapore. During a meeting with top aides, the South Korean leader pointed out the latest diplomacy tour clearly helped promote the new Southern policy. HeungMin shares with us his remarks.
The core of the Moon administration's foreign policy has been to diversify South Korea's diplomacy and expand its diplomatic horizon. And in that respect, the South Korean president says his state visits to India and Singapore have put his new Southern policy right on track.
신남방 정책의 양대 축은 인도와 아세안이고 싱가포르는 금년도 아세안 의장국입니다. 이번에 인도 아세안과의 관계를 미일 중러 주변 4개국 수준으로 발전시킬 튼튼한 토대를 다졌습니다.
President Moon said Seoul and New Delhi have agreed to increase their annual trade volume to $50 billion by the year 2030 and to cooperate in responding to the fourth industrial revolution, thus upgrading the current relationship to a special strategic partnership. He also noted his plan to integrate his new Southern policy with India's Act East policy, that is, India's efforts to prioritize relations with its East Asian neighbors in order to co-create people-centered peace and mutual prosperity. Regarding his visit to Singapore, President Moon said he laid the foundation for South Korea's more active participation in the construction of transportation and infrastructure in Singapore. He also said the two countries have decided to create new growth engines in the future by working together in areas including smart cities, fintech, and the bio and medical fields. The South Korean president also said India and Singapore have both agreed to help resolve the North Korean nuclear issue and help the regime become a part of the international community.
신남방 정책은 선택사항이 아니라 대한민국 번영을 이끌 국가 발전 전략의 핵심이며 우리가 담대하게 그리는 신경제 지도의 핵심 축입니다.
It was last November when President Moon Jae-in first coined the term New Southern Policy while visiting Indonesia. Since then, he's been to several other South and Southeastern Asian countries, making many agreements in numerous summit meetings. President Moon Jae-in called on his top aides to work so those diplomatic achievements can be felt by Korean businesses and ordinary people alike. HeungMin, Arirang News.
Keeping our sights fixated in Seoul, lawmakers elected the chairs of the National Assembly standing committees today, with major positions all filled and their plates full for the July session. This is where the real work begins for the members. Kim Min-ji has the latest from the domestic political arena.
The setting of the latter half of the 20th National Assembly has more or less taken shape. In a plenary session on Monday, rival lawmakers elected the chairs of 16 of the 18 parliamentary committees. They'll vote on the heads of another 2 committees on Thursday next week. This as rival parties agreed to split the Committee on Education, Culture, Sports and Tourism into 2 separate ones, one in charge of education and the other the remaining 3 areas, a process which first requires a revision to the National Assembly Act. The distribution of the committees was decided based on the number of seats each party holds. The ruling party will chair 8, including the House Steering Committee, which is responsible for overall parliamentary affairs and oversees the presidential office, plus the committees on national policy and finance. The main opposition Liberty Korea party had 7, including the Legislative Committee, where bills are reviewed before being put up for a full floor vote, and the committees for foreign affairs and the environment. The legislature has been back in action since last Friday, when it approved a new parliamentary speaker and vice speakers for the latter half of the 20th National Assembly, which put an end to over 40 days of paralysis. Earlier in the day, National Assembly Speaker Moon Hee-sang met with the floor leaders of the country's negotiating blocs for the first time since assuming the post, and stressed that the parties must now come together to address the people's needs.
Each and every one of you here needs to be at the forefront to get the National Assembly moving on the right track. What people will want is a mature, sophisticated parliament that can be trusted and respected by the people.
With rival lawmakers having decided which standing committees they will be part of, it's now time to get down to the piles of bills and other items that have been waiting for them. Some political wrangling could also be in the works, with confirmation hearings coming up for the nominee for Commissioner General of the National Police Agency and 3 candidates for the Supreme Court. There are other pending issues to deal with as well, such as the implications of this year's minimum wage hike. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Koreans are starting the week under sizzly yet humid conditions. Heatwave advisories or warnings issued in all corners of the nation as well. Bin sheds light on what the Seoul city government is doing to help people stay cool and out of harm's way.
Seoul has been issued with its first heatwave warning of the year. The warnings are given when the temperature goes above 33 degrees Celsius for 2 days in a row, and people in Seoul are looking for ways to combat this sweltering weather.
It's definitely hotter than Canada, where I'm from, and I think it's very important to stay hydrated in this weather. Otherwise, it can be very dangerous.
To be honest, it's so hot. There's sweat dripping down my forehead. It makes me want to drink something cold every time I walk.
The city has been helping the citizens beat the heat in various ways. One of the systems installed is the cooling fog system, which sprays small droplets of water to lower the temperature. Several resting areas with parasols have also been installed in the city to help people overcome the heat. Many citizens are staying in the shade, and some have stopped going out in the daytime. But the nighttime tropical temperatures are no different either. The Korea Meteorological Administration has also advised citizens to refrain from doing outdoor activities and to take plenty of rest. As the temperature looks like it will keep on rising, this summer season in Korea could get even hotter than before. Bin, Arirang News.
Moving on to other stories now, President Moon Jae-in ordered the military to immediately turn in all documents that detail plans to declare martial law drafted by its intel unit. It's been reported that such a move was planned in case protests grow violent following a court ruling on Park Geun-hye.
President Moon said although the case will be investigated strictly and fairly by the Defense Ministry's special team, as the commander-in-chief, he needs to find out what really happened and whether the martial law plan had been ready to the level of execution.
This comes amid an ongoing probe into revelations this past week of a document showing the military's Defense Security Command in late 2016 drafting plans to mobilize troops to suppress protests and crack down on rallies and candlelight vigils against the disgraced leader. She was removed from office over broad corruption allegations in December 2016. The plans for troop deployment were never carried out. Following President Moon's order for the military to immediately turn in all documents related to the intel unit's contingency plan for troop deployment during the candlelight protest, the nation's defense chief unveiled further details about the controversy. Park Ji-won gets us up to speed with the developments.
As a special team began its investigation into allegations raised about the Defense Security Command on Monday, questions are being raised about why it has taken so long since Defense Minister Song Young-moo was first briefed about the existence of such documents back in March. There are questions over why Minister Song didn't take any actions over the documents until early July, when President Moon Jae-in gave an urgent order to launch the independent investigation. The Defense Ministry announced Monday that Minister Song had decided not to disclose the documents based on the political situation at the time.
The minister had decided not to disclose the documents in order to maintain a friendly atmosphere on the peninsula for the success of the Winter Olympics and Paralympics, as well as for the following inter-Korean summit talks. The minister also considered the possibility of the matter being used politically during the local elections on June 13th.
The Defense Ministry said Song held meetings with key presidential aides in late April, the earliest possible time the defense chief could talk to the presidential office on the need for reform of the Defense Security Command after the Inter-Korean Summit on April 27th, and mentioned the existence of such documents without fully revealing the details. Since then, the ministry has launched a reform task force.
The reform of the Defense Security Command will focus on completely preventing the intelligence unit's interference in domestic politics through stern investigation and strict punishment for those involved in illegal acts, and will improve the legal and institutional framework so that the intel unit can focus on its counter-espionage and security activities.
The controversial document suggests that the intelligence unit had attempted to illegally interfere in domestic politics regarding the 2014 Seoul ferry disaster. Other documents suggest that it drew up a contingency plan regarding the possibility of martial law during the nationwide candlelight demonstration that demanded the resignation of former President Park Geun-hye. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
Seoul's diplomats sat down for talks with the newly appointed U.S. ambassador to Korea this afternoon. Kang Kyung-hwa welcomed Harry Harris to his new post, saying Seoul and Washington are blessed to have him at the momentous time on the peninsula. Here's what the duo exchanged during that meeting.
I think you can count on myself and the Foreign Ministry, certainly, to be fully working with you and your team to ensure that the alliance remains strong, and that is the basis upon which we go further in advancing the denuclearization agenda and also our search for lasting peace on the Korean Peninsula. So, again, welcome.
Well, thank you, Madam Minister. Let me just say that I've been welcomed with open arms by the Korean people and the folks with whom I've met. It has been a wonderful 9 days, and I hope that it'll be the start of a wonderful several years on the peninsula. It's great to be back here to see you. Thank you for your time.
Harris began his term as the ambassador early this month. The admiral served as the chief of the U.S. Pacific Command until retiring in May. He takes a post that's been vacant ever since President Donald Trump took office. On Sunday, officials from Pyongyang and Washington met for talks on returning the remains of American soldiers still unaccounted for from the Korean War. According to our Park Hee-jun, the session that was delayed due to communication issues produced some concrete results.
North Korea and the U.S. have agreed to resume joint field operations to search for the remains of more than 5,000 American troops who were killed during the Korean War, a result of their meeting on Sunday at the inter-Korean border. Following the meeting, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said in a statement that the talks were productive and cooperative and resulted in firm commitments. U.S. President Donald Trump also took to Twitter to hail the progress being made with North Korea. The repatriation of American soldiers was one of the agreements reached during the Kim-Trump summit in Singapore in mid-June. Talks to implement the agreement were originally planned for Thursday last week, but were delayed after the North Korean representatives failed to show up. They later called the UN command, asking to reschedule for Sunday and to involve military generals, which resulted in the first general-level military talks between the two sides in 9 years. And on Monday, working-level talks are set to take place to iron out the details of the repatriation, including the transfer of remains that have already been collected in North Korea. Citing an unnamed U.S. official, CNN reports that the two sides are aiming to transfer the remains of some 200 American troops within the next 2 to 3 weeks. The U.S. already has 100 wooden caskets waiting at Panmunjom to carry the soldiers' remains back home. Park Hee-jun, Arirang News.
Over in Helsinki, it's the first official summit between President Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin. The meeting, originally scheduled for 1:15 p.m. in Finland or 7:15 p.m. Korea time, has been delayed with the Russian leader arriving 30 minutes late. The official agenda has not been released, but issues like arms control, U.S. sanctions, Ukraine and Syria are expected to be on the table. However, on Sunday, ahead of that session, President Trump struck a pessimistic tone in an interview with CBS.
I don't expect anything. I frankly don't expect. I go in with very low expectations. I think that getting along with Russia is a good thing, but it's possible we won't. I think we're greatly hampered by this whole witch hunt that's going on in the United States, the Russian witch hunt.
The summit comes just days after America's Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein announced 12 Russians were indicted for allegedly hacking during the 2016 U.S. elections. Trump said he would raise the issue with Putin and may even ask him to have the dozen sent to America. Sports continue to help promote peace and harmony between the two Koreas. Seoul and Pyongyang's table tennis players held 2 practice sessions to test their chemistry and get ready for an upcoming tournament. Kan Young-woo zooms in on how the joint squad is gelling.
South and North Korea will be competing as one this week in table tennis for only the third time in history at this year's Korea Open, which begins on Tuesday in Daejeon. The North Korean players arrived in the South on Sunday and held 2 practice sessions on Monday with their South Korean teammates. 4 joint teams will take on players from all over the world in the men's, women's, and mixed doubles over the course of the 6-day tournament. According to the Korea Table Tennis Association, South Korea's Lee Sang-soo will pair up with the North Park Shin-hyuk for the men's doubles event, and in the women's doubles, it will be Seo Hyo-won and Kim Song-hee. For mixed doubles, South Korea's Jang Woo-jin and North Cha Hyo-sim will play together, as will Yoon Chung and Choi Il. The two Koreas have already played together once before this year. Back in May, they formed unified teams at the World Team Table Championship in Sweden, where South Korea's Seo Hyo-won and the North's Kim Song-hee paired up to take home the bronze medal. Representing peace and harmony on the international stage through sports, the two Koreas' joint teams will now seek to use this so-called ping-pong diplomacy to show the world how well they can work together. 간영우, Arirang News, Daejeon.
Staying with sports news, Tottenham Hotspur forward HeungMin will be a Taeguk warrior in Jakarta. The Korea Football Association unveiled the men's national football team roster for the Asian Games, and the star striker is one of the 3 wildcard players for the Under-23 tournament. Each team is allowed up to 3 players over the age of 23. Head coach Kim Hak-bum selected Son as well as Hwang Hee-jo and goalie Cho Yeon-woo. The trio could earn an exemption from their mandatory military service if they manage to win gold. It seemed all but forgotten that 2 decades ago, an underrated French squad shocked the world by destroying the seemingly untouchable Brazilian all-star team in the World Cup finals. They reminded the world never to underestimate the heart of a champion by lifting the cup after beating Croatia 4-2. Naturally, over in Paris, soccer fans celebrate like there's no tomorrow. Choi Si-young takes us there.
Tens of thousands of French fans gathered along the Champs-Élysées Avenue and near the Eiffel Tower in Paris to cheer for their national team. The French fans went wild as their team scored 4 goals against Croatia. They waved their national flag and sung the French national anthem together. The final whistle blows to give France their 2nd World Cup title, 20 years since they first won the World Cup on home soil in 1998.
We can't explain it. There are no words because we're supposed to live it just once in our life, and now it's the 2nd time, so we're on cloud 9.
The upbeat mood was everywhere.
We're all together singing, dancing, even if we don't know each other. It's putting us together.
This is extraordinary. It feels good. Finally, the 2nd star. Bravo, France. It's a relief. We are feeling relief. It's the 2nd youngest team at the World Cup, and we are very proud of them.
French President Emmanuel Macron will invite the national team to the Élysée Palace on Monday local time to congratulate them on their victory. Before meeting the president, the national team will have a victory parade from Arc de Triomphe to the Place de la Concorde. Choi Si-young, Arirang News.
Time to turn to Michelle Bach at the Weather Center for the updates you need. Michelle, Seoul and lots of other places have broke this season's highest temperature records, I hear.
That's right, Daniel. It seems like the daily highs are breaking records every day now. Now, Seoul hitting up to 34 degrees Celsius today, and most of the advisories have now been upgraded into warnings. It'll be like this or even worse until next month, but the longer there's no rain, the longer it'll last. Now, Korea will have sunny skies again tomorrow, but it'll be raining or cloudy with thunder in Beijing and also Tokyo. Remember, urban areas tend to retain heat, which leads to tropical nights. So for most parts of the coolest, it'll be mostly in the mid-20s, Seoul at 24 degrees Celsius. Tomorrow, the highs in Seoul will hit up to 34, Gwangju 36, and Daegu at 37 degrees, but it'll feel like 40. And make sure to take the right precautions to stay healthy under this heat because, as far as I can tell, these exhausting conditions will remain through the rest of the week without any rain. I'll leave you with the weather conditions around the world.
That's all we could pack into tonight's edition of Arirang News Center. Wherever you may be tuning in from, thanks for staying with us.